This night was considered part of a pageant of festivals that were of course pagan in origin. They were satanic in origin. They were basically ways of celebrating the change of seasons. And of course, in the northern hemisphere, this is when the nights started getting longer and the weather started getting colder. And it was believed that on this night, or Halloween night, that the god of the dead was going to die and then be reborn later. And of course, he was reborn on the next feast, which would have been Yule, which is December 23rd, 24th, somewhere in there. And so this time that he was dying was a time of great fear in these people. And so the way they dealt with that is by human sacrifice. They felt that if they could shed enough blood, especially the blood of children, that they could somehow let this passing of their God be a propitious one. And of course, this is all really evil, but we see it even in the Bible, the idea of Molech, the idea of Chemosh, the god of the Moabites. All these different cultures all celebrated this festival by child sacrifice, by throwing babies into a flaming idol or something equally awful. And this is the origins of Halloween. And the problem is that even to this day, it is still a high satanic holiday. It's still a high witch holiday. And that means if you're celebrating it, you're celebrating, basically what some Satanists believe is the devil's birthday. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to do anything to celebrate about the devil. At some time, in the early Christian era, the Catholic Church decided to try and sort of baptize Halloween and Samhain, and they called it All Hallows Eve. They associated it with All Saints Day and All Souls Day, which is November 1st on the liturgical calendar. You can't take something that's evil and slap some paint on it and all of a sudden it's good. And the trouble is that in many cultures, I mean, this is kind of a universal thing. Like many people might know that in Latino countries, they have the Day of the Dead on this day when people, run around dressed up as skeletons and all of that. And it's very similar to Halloween. They just call it by a different name. And see, I don't think that we should be celebrating death. I think we should be celebrating life. Halloween was actually illegal in the days of the Puritans. It was really illegal all through the 18th and a lot of the 19th century in America. And it was only when the influx of Irish immigrants started in the 19th century, some of my ancestors came over here and they brought Halloween with them. And you know how in our country we see that things gradually have gotten more and more, lax or whatever word you want to use. And so people began to celebrate. And of course, now it's become a huge marketing thing. I mean, they're trying to make it as big as Christmas. And but the trouble is, again, it's evil. And I would just like to share briefly why I'm so passionate about this. I had a personal experience with Halloween when I was 10 years old. And I was out trick-or-treating. And this was, way back before there was anything really sinister about it. I think I was dressed as a little clown or something, going door to door getting candy. And I actually was walking down the street. It was Halloween night, beautiful October evening in the Midwest. And I looked up. And as I looked up, I saw the sky was just full of demons. And just black, leathery things with red eyes. And their eyes just stared into me. And I could feel something unclean hit my soul at that moment. And I believe at that moment, my soul was defiled by the demonic spirits that surround Halloween. And, after that, I can look at my life, even as a young child, that I gradually began to be interested in the occult and, various weird things. And by the time, of course, I was in college, I'd become a witch. So I think that the danger to children, especially because children are more vulnerable, but even to adults, it's a dangerous time. And we really encourage parents to pray over their children during this season, to not let their children run around alone, and to not let them go trick or treat, but rather have some kind of fun that you can do as a family. Again, in the British Isles and in probably Northern Europe as well, there was this custom of lighting. They were originally called bale fires. and it related to Baal, who's of course a false god. We see Baal even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, and they would use these as a way of trying to keep the sun god from dying, like we were talking earlier about blood sacrifice. And you're right, later on they became known as bone fires, and then over the years got cleaned up to bonfires, because they would throw animals into it. They might even throw babies into it in some cultures. It was not a good thing. And because again, this is all about sympathetic magic, about sending forth the lives of innocent beings, so that this god, this supposed god, who of course is ultimately really Satan, can live. Back in the ancient times, the idea is that these satanic priests would go into a village, and they would say, they'd go up to a house at random in that village, and they would, put a mark on the door and say, you have to give us your youngest child, or we'll destroy your house. And then we're going to take that child and sacrifice it to the dark god Saman, who's the god of Samhain, the god of death. And of course, if the parents refused, then they would destroy the household. They'd burn the house to the ground. And today, of course, it's more benign, and the kids go and say, give us candy, or we'll soap your windows, or TP your trees, or something like that. But it's not a good thing. And again, you're playing around with diabolical things, and you're playing around with things that are rooted in human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and child sacrifice. They actually would take, some of the remains of these poor unfortunate children, and they would make candles out of them, and they'd put these inside of either skulls or inside of large gourds or something of that nature. And they would believe that if they pointed this grinning face outward, it would be a sign to the demons to leave this house alone. So it was kind of like a talisman to ward off evil. But of course, the problem is again, there's this very ancient, if you will, cult about the severed head, which is present all over the Northern Europe, all over the British Isles, and how it somehow relates to, well, in the British Isles, it relates to Bran, the Blessed, he's called, but in other countries, it relates to other various beings, gods, demons, whatever, and it's all very evil. It's would you want to have a thing burning on your doorstep that was made out of, human baby fat or something of that nature? Well, that was a sign that house was okay then, that it had been, they'd offered up their tithe to hell, so to speak, in the form of their firstborn child, or their youngest child, I'm sorry. And so that's kind of, the meaning of that. And now, of course, we just see it as a sign of this house is going along with the Halloween thing. It actually has a much more sinister origin. And see, what people need to understand is that these symbols have a power all their own. I mean, you might say, well, it's just a pumpkin, for heaven's sakes. Well, yeah, it is just a pumpkin. But you see, in magic, in black magic, in the occult, there's this idea of thought forms and egregores. That's the word that's used from Greek. And it means basically something that gets power all of its own over the centuries, over thousands and thousands of years of use. And it kind of, demons and strong men come to inhabit it. So even if the person might put this pumpkin out and carve a face on it and whatnot and put a candle in it and think, oh, I'm just kind of being cute like the neighborhood is, it still might very well draw demonic spirits. And, again, there's some sort of meaning behind this, which we do not understand. And this is true of a lot of things. Another thing that comes to mind is the whole thing of witches on a broomstick. You see, that actually goes back to the fact that in the Middle Ages, witches would literally the symbol of a high priestess's authority was her broomstick, which is called a besom. And she would, on certain nights of the year, when they were like planting crops or whatever, they would go out and they would jump around the field after they planted the crop on these broomsticks. And they believed that the higher they jumped, that's how high the crops were. So again, we're talking about sympathetic magic, what's called folk magic. And it was believed that as they did this, that it would make the ground more fertile and whatnot. And of course, some people that weren't witches were probably spying to see, ooh, what are these witches doing? And they saw them, jumping around this field. And, oh, they're going to take off and they're going to fly, just like, some birds take a while to get off the ground.